Welcome back to You're Not Even Base Bro. I'm Vivi, and this is my co-host, Leighton. Satan.
Yeah, how's it going, guys? We have yet another episode for you. After a little bit of procrastination on our part, shit has been busy. So, I think we're gonna get right back into the swing of things, and just to clarify for people who've never seen this bizarre channel that you just so happened upon, we basically just believe that AI is happening. It's coming at an exponential rate, that it is going to take over all of the jobs, and we believe that it's definitely a very high likelihood that it's going to be used and abused by the military-industrial complex and not used for the average citizen or the average citizen of the world's benefit. And so that's kind of just like, that's where we're starting, and all the video clips that we show support that and kind of get into some of the nitty-gritty of how that goes and why we think that's the case. So yeah, starting off, I think a big subject lately has been tech censorship. And one of the main things that, like, we played clips from AOC, from Kamala, from Bill Gates, talking about we need censorship, we need, people online that have misinformative views to be censored, and, we've also covered a lot of shit where basically the CIA and different random departments of the government have had a very big hand in, basically manipulating and infiltrating social media companies like Facebook and Google and a lot of these companies, and Twitter prior to it being X, and forced a lot of censorship on them and banned a lot of people that specifically didn't agree with the government's views, which is extremely dystopian. And people are like, are we going to get a cyberpunk dystopia? We're already there. It's been there with China for a while, and we're definitely already there now. So, this video is JD fucking Vance talking about what the deal is with tech censorship, and Tim Dillon asking him some questions about this. And, whatever you think politically is kosher or not, it is interesting to hear what these guys have to say.
I really appreciate doing this. How do you prevent tech censorship? We've talked about it. It's a huge problem. Yeah. I mean, I know it's a tough thing to have an exact answer for, but what are some thoughts?
So very simply, and this is like not a traditional Republican answer, but the Google antitrust lawsuit that's moving through the courts right now was actually started under Donald Trump's administration.
Yeah.
I think you have to break these companies up. I think they're too big. They become monopolists. They become too powerful. And frankly, they became too powerful thanks to government privileges, right? These aren't like natural monopolies that just came up out of the free market.
Right.
They were handed special favors by the government. They used that power to become monopolists, and now they tell Americans what they can or can't say. I don't think there's actually a way to solve it. Like, if Google is so big, it's extremely hard to be able to ensure that Google doesn't engage in censorship. I just think these companies have to be separated.
So break up the companies.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting view. I think a lot of people have a perception about the Trump administration that, he sold out, he brought in John Bolton and Bruce Mattis or whatever the other corrupt military-industrial politicians into his administration, his first round. And then I think it's interesting to hear his new running mate talking openly about literally breaking up Google as a monopoly, which is something that you really haven't heard from Republicans previously, talking about antitrust shit. Usually Republicans are fully for monopolies, and the left is oh, we need antitrust regulation, we need to break up these monopolies that are abusing people or whatever. It's interesting to watch the tables turn. To be sure. So, I I definitely agree that Google needs to be broken up. The history he was talking about with them being kind of created by the government to some degree, it goes back to DARPA, literally. Basically created Google, created a lot of the tech that then Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google, pretty much turned into the search engine that we know today. It was all military searching technology for data optimization, and they just said, "Oh, let's give it to the public now." It's very interesting to like if you actually get into the origins of Google, and we just kind of take Google for granted, and we're like, "Oh, let me Google it," but it actually had an origin, and it was a weird intelligence community-esque origin. So the more you know. This next clip is my favorite fucking guy of all time, Schollenberg. That's what I call him, Schollenberger.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Plaskett, members of the committee, thank you very much for inviting my testimony. In his 1961 farewell address, President Dwight Eisenhower warned of, quote, the acquisition of unwarranted influence by the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower feared that the size and power of the complex, or cluster, of government contractors in the Defense Department would, quote, endanger our liberties or democratic processes. How did he mean that? Through, quote, domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money. He feared public policy would become the captive of a scientific, technological elite. Eisenhower's fears were well-founded. Today, American taxpayers are unwittingly financing the growth and power of a censorship industrial complex run by America's scientific and technological elite, which endangers our liberties and democracy. I'm grateful for this opportunity to offer this testimony and sound the alarm over the shocking and disturbing emergence of state-sponsored censorship in the United States of America. The Twitter files, state attorneys general lawsuits, and investigative reporters have revealed a large and growing network of government agencies, academic institutions, and non-governmental organizations that are actively censoring American citizens, often without their knowledge, on a range of issues. I do not know how much of the censorship is coordinated beyond what we have been able to document, and I will not speculate. I recognize that the law allows Facebook, Twitter, and other private companies to moderate content on their platforms, and I support the right of governments to communicate with the public, including to dispute inaccurate information. But government officials have been caught repeatedly pushing social media platforms to censor disfavored users and content. Often these acts of censorship threaten the legal protection social media companies need to exist, Section 230. If government officials are directing or facilitating such censorship, notes one law professor, it raises serious First Amendment questions. It is axiomatic that the government cannot do indirectly what it is prohibited from doing directly. Moreover, we know that the U.S. government has funded organizations that pressure advertisers to boycott news media organizations and social media platforms that refuse to censor and/or spread disinformation, including alleged conspiracy theories. The Stanford Internet Observatory, the University of Washington, the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, and Graphica have all inadequately disclosed ties to the Department of Defense, the CIA, and other intelligence agencies. They work with multiple U.S. government agencies to institutionalize censorship research and advocacy within dozens of other universities and think tanks. It is important to understand how these groups function. They are not publicly engaging with their opponents in an open exchange of ideas. They aren't asking for a national debate over the limits of the First Amendment. Rather, they are creating blacklists of disfavored people and then pressuring, cajoling, and demanding that social media platforms censor, de-amplify, and even ban the people on those lists. The censorship industrial complex combines established methods of psychological manipulation, some developed by the U.S. military during the global war on terror, with highly sophisticated tools from computer science, including artificial intelligence. The complex's leaders are driven by the fear that the internet and social media platforms empower populist, alternative, and fringe personalities and views which they regard as destabilizing. Federal government officials, agencies, and contractors have gone from fighting ISIS recruiters and Russian bots to censoring and deplatforming ordinary Americans and disfavored public figures. Importantly, the bar for bringing in military-grade government monitoring and speech countering techniques has moved from, quote, countering terrorism to, quote, countering extremism to countering simple misinformation, otherwise known as being wrong on the internet. The government no longer needs a predicate of calling you a terrorist or an extremist to deploy government resources to counter your political activity. The only predicate it needs is simply the assertion that the opinion you expressed on social media is wrong. These efforts extend to influencing and even directing conventional news media organizations. Since 1971, when the Washington Post and New York Times elected to publish classified Pentagon papers about the war in Vietnam, journalists have understood that we have a professional obligation to report on leaked documents whose contents are in the public interest. And yet in 2020, the Aspen Institute and Stanford Cyber Policy Center urged journalists to, quote, break the Pentagon Papers principle and not cover leaked information to prevent the spread of disinformation. Government-funded censors frequently invoke the prevention of real-world harm to justify their demands for censorship, but the censors define harm far more expansively than the Supreme Court does. Increasingly, the censors say their goal is to restrict information that delegitimizes governmental, industrial, and news media organizations. That mandate is so sweeping that it could easily censor criticism from any part of the status quo, from elected officials to institutions to laws. Congress should immediately cut off funding to the censors and investigate their activities. It should mandate instant reporting of all conversations between social media executives, government employees, and government contractors concerning content moderation. And finally, Congress should limit the broad permission given to social media platforms to censor, deplatform, and spread propaganda. Thank you very much.
Holy fucking shit. So literally, the government's excuse for censoring you is that you are wrong on the internet. That's the literal definition of misinformation. That you're wrong and they think it could be destabilizing to institutions or whatever the fuck.
Nah.
So what basically, let me put it in this context. So imagine before the American Revolution, Britain, King Henry or King George, it was King George. What if he thought that the talk of creating a separate United States was destabilizing to the institution? So he could have just censored that? Would you rather that we be under King George's power right now? I don't think so. Sometimes the government is fucking wrong. We have free speech in this country specifically because our forefathers knew that sometimes government is wrong, and it is up to the people, up to movements of communication to essentially counter that wrongness. And free speech and whatever is correct is the idea is that it will preside. The idea behind that is obviously broken. Obviously not everything is correct that is popular opinion, but it's the best damn thing we have. There is no reason to change what obviously works to some degree. So, this next clip is the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, or however you say his name, speaking at the UN Council to Americans. The president of El Salvador speaking to Americans about our censorship.
También estamos siendo testigos en tiempo real de la erosión de la libertad de expresión. Hace apenas una década, Occidente era el bastión de la libertad de expresión y ahora es sermoneado por quienes solían denunciar. Las plataformas más grandes de redes sociales en el mundo fueron obligadas a censurar a sus usuarios a petición de sus gobiernos. Ciudadanos de países occidentales han sido arrestados por compartir publicaciones en redes sociales. Los partidos gobernantes han intentado prohibir a su oposición política. Estas no son acusaciones ni teorías de conspiración, son hechos comprobables y ampliamente documentados. No se puede ganar el respeto del pueblo sin respetar al pueblo.
Bro is literally telling us the fuck off in front of the entire UN. Imagine when El Salvador has to be the voice of fucking reason. El fucking Salvador. It's kind of trippy, to be honest. It really is. Like, how insane and just out of left pocket this censorship is for no reason. So you may say, Leighton, censorship isn't real. It doesn't actually happen. No one gets censored. You know, if fucking Joe Rogan can spread misinformation still and he hasn't been blocked, then surely misinformation isn't actually being censored. So, guess what? We get censored. We get censored all the fucking time. I am now on my 3rd TikTok account. And TikTok isn't even owned by the fucking CIA or the fucking government. I do think a lot of the groupthink and propaganda that is being pushed on all the media platforms has affected the way activist people on these sites behave and has them genuinely tripping the second they hear anything about anything. Now, I'm going to play at the end one of the clips that got censored so you can kind of see, like, is this actually misinformation? Is this crazy stuff that's being censored? It's not. It's not. Check this out. This is what it looks like when you get banned and censored on TikTok. Removed for integrity and authenticity. It's like, who's fucking... Did you fact check this? Did you Google the fucking shit in this? Even so, is Google always accurate when you Google things? How do you know that this is missing in integrity or authenticity? They said, misinformation. In a global community, it is natural for people to have different opinions, but we seek to operate on a shared set of facts and reality. We do not allow inaccurate, misleading, or false content that may cause significant harm to individuals or society regardless of intent. Significant harm includes physical, psychological, or societal harm and property damage. See community guidelines. What the fuck did I do that is causing significant harm to individuals? That is the most bullshit I've ever fucking heard in my life. Whoever the fuck reported me can go to fuck to hell. Jesus fucking Christ. Get a life, people. Stop preventing people from talking about actual documented historical abuses by government. If we can't talk about abuses by the government and reasons to distrust the government, you think they're going to stop doing things to us?
No.
I mean, they're probably not going to stop even if we talk about it. Even if everybody talks about it. They don't give a fuck. But, yeah, we probably should still be able to fucking talk about it. So, let's kind of segue here into talking about the military-industrial complex. Now, just as a brief sum up, the military-industrial complex includes all of the defense contractors. There's really five big defense contractors. And basically they're corrupt. They lobby a bunch of politicians. They have spread out their locations so that they can, like, basically convince all of the politicians in all of the states to promote whatever decisions that benefit them. And there's plenty of reason to believe that they are literally causing wars for their own profit. So let's get a little sum up here of kind of some of the biggest problems just on the financial side of what's wrong with the military-industrial complex. And this is Palmer Luckey speaking. He is an owner of a defense contractor, but not one of the big five. He's the owner of a little startup defense contractor that builds drones that is partially owned by Peter Thiel. Check this out. Oh, and also he is the creator of the Oculus Rift VR goggles.
We've seen massive consolidation and massive distortion in the defense industry since the end of the Cold War. You have about 80% of the major weapons contracts going to just 5 companies. 30% of major weapons contracts have a single bidder, meaning only one company even shows up to even try to deliver. And that has led to gross inefficiencies, massive centralization, duplicating work that's been done 1,000 times before, and almost no examples of proactive investment on the part of the industry in order to try and do the right things. Most of these people are working on cost plus contracts, where they get paid for time, materials, and then a fixed percentage of profit on top. That means that they make more money when things take longer. They make more money when the schedule slips. They make more money when the parts are more expensive. And so what can you expect in a system with those kinds of incentives? You can only expect what you incentivize. Longer schedules, more expensive systems that are more complicated and break more often, and zero investment of your own dollars into fixing the problems or building products from scratch.
Evil Elijah Wood has some really good points. So yeah, basically what he's saying is they are you know how there's like a lot of stereotypes about like union workers, that they're just like working as slow as they can to collect their hourly paycheck and stuff like that, and that like making it go real slow and shit. It really happens at almost every job that's salaried, or not salaried, hourly. But yeah, they're literally doing that with our tax dollars. We spend with our tax dollars every year $1 trillion fucking dollars on our military. What's up with that? And we've been spending exponentially more and more and more on our military every year. And we're in debt. The interest payments on our federal debt are more now than we spend on our military every year. So we can't keep spending like this. You know, we talked about breaking up monopolies earlier with Google. These 5 are monopolies, and they're monopolies that are literally operating in step with each other to price fix, to raise prices, to take our fucking tax dollars and literally rape the fuck out of all of us, inflate our money, print the fuck out of it, and now guess what's happening with Ukraine and Gaza? That money we give them, it goes straight to these fucking companies. Every single war that we have had in the past any amount of time has been caused by politicians and the intelligence agencies that told us, we gotta go into war. We got weapons of mass destruction. We got blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I sound like Alex Jones. So why did we go into those wars? Oh, maybe we went into those wars to profit these monopolistic, evil, sketchy-ass, scammy-ass companies. Yep. Think about it. Just think about it. So this is Johnny Harris, a phenomenal YouTuber that covers a lot of this shit and other various geopolitical shit, talking about specifically this. And this is, he outlines it perfectly. Check this shit out.
The Pentagon has, up until this point in 2024, never successfully passed an audit. American taxpayers want to know how our tax dollars are getting spent, and the fact that the department that's getting such a huge chunk of the federal budget can't account for all of the dollars it's getting is definitely a problem.
For 6 years in a row now, the Pentagon has failed to pass an independent audit. They've brought in a bunch of accountants and said, tell us where all of our stuff is and what we spend our money on, and the accountants say, no, we can't do it. 61% of their physical assets are missing. They don't know where they are, which means they're probably investing a lot of money in stuff that they already have and they just don't know it. But my bigger question here is why? The United States pulled out of Afghanistan a few years ago. The war in Iraq is over. but spending continues to go up. And spending went down for like a split second, but look, it's going up again. Okay, well, first off, remember what we talked about earlier. The US is not a normal country with a regular military. The US is the global hegemon who uses its military to assert control and order over every corner of the globe. But there's another reason why this budget is so high. And this reason is much more infuriating to me. What our little graph here doesn't reveal is that most of this money is going to private corporations who get 466 billion of these dollars, about 54%. And once again, the US government tells us exactly which corporations they give all this money to. We pulled the last 19 years worth of data on these private contractors. At the top of this list, you start to see the same names over and over. Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. These are the names at the top of these lists, year after year. There used to be a lot of different defense contractors, but over the last 3 decades, they got gobbled up by these big 5. Transitioning, from the words of the Pentagon, from 51 to 5 aerospace and defense prime contractors. As a result, the DoD is increasingly reliant on a small number of contractors for critical defense capabilities, i.e., we've got kind of a monopoly issue on our hands. These 5 contractors own the space, and the Pentagon can't really go elsewhere if they need an F-35. There's only one shop in town that makes it. For this reason, the prices can get pretty out of control. Like the Pentagon used to pay $25,000 for this Stinger missile, and now they pay nearly $500,000 for the same missile. The price went up more than 16 times in just a couple decades. It's a little more than inflation.
There's a history of defense contractors overcharging the U.S. government. They can overcharge. If they're the only company producing a certain widget, then there's no competition. And that's one of the problems with monopoly, is if there's not competition, it's easy to overcharge the buyer. In addition, the Inspector General of the Department of Defense has found routinely that there's overcharging through corruption and waste and fraud. And there have been lawsuits, for example, KBR is a contractor that's been used overseas, and they were found to overcharge in dining halls by 30 to 40%.
It's also why a Pentagon inspector realized that the Pentagon was paying Boeing, yes, that Boeing, $3,357 for one ball bearing, a small little piece that the Pentagon could actually get for $15 in their own warehouse. $15.42 to be precise. When the Pentagon does get around to investigating these contractors, they sometimes find that they're taking huge profits, like 40 to 50% profit margins, giving them hundreds and millions of dollars above what they should be making in any kind of typical business environment. And what do they do with all these profits? Well, they pay their executives very well. But this list also tells us what they do. This is a list of how much money these defense contractors spend to influence our lawmakers into spending more money on the military so that these companies can make more money. You can see right here that Lockheed Martin is at the top of the list. So far this year, in this election cycle, Lockheed Martin has spent $2.7 million, split pretty evenly between Democrats and Republicans. This is a number that will continue to go up as we get closer to the election, and it is money spent to cozy up to lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, contributing to their campaigns, bringing them out to show them how great their weapons are, doing whatever they can to make sure that the money keeps flowing to their companies. These companies also benefit from the infamous revolving door. The revolving door is not a literal door, it's a metaphorical door between the Pentagon and the defense corporations, which allows top military leaders like Jim Mattis to serve in the military for decades, retire as a general, and then join the board of General Dynamics, a defense contractor, only to pass through the proverbial door to become the Secretary of Defense under Trump. After which, he passes through the door again to go back onto the board of General Dynamics, bringing with him all of his insider knowledge and government contacts and influence. And no, this is not just Jim Mattis. This is a very normal thing that people do here in DC. One analysis found that in 2022, top defense companies hired 672 employees directly out of the Pentagon to work as lobbyists, board members, and executives.
Lovely. So, they're definitely ripping the fuck out of us. $25,000 for a Stinger missile versus $250,000. Almost $500,000 for one fucking anti-tank missile. Does that seem like it's an actual good use of money? Especially when you could strap a fucking bomb, a cheap bomb, to a DJI drone that costs $2,000, drive it over a tank, drop it into the fucking hatch, and take off with the drone and be able to reuse the drone? Yeah, we don't need these weapons anymore. These weapons are defunct. War is changing. That is what Anduril, Palmer Luckey's company, does, is they make cheaper drones that aren't these exquisite, top-of-the-line F-35, like, extremely expensive, totally unnecessary fucking shit. So, we're going to take a break from talking about the military-industrial complex, just now that we've kind of covered that and created the context there. This is a very interesting, concerning law that was just passed by the Pentagon under the Biden-Harris administration. And it doesn't bode well for the election year. It doesn't bode well for anybody that disagrees with the government. Check this out.
George Moore says the Pazzi Comitatus Act, or better known as the Commie Positano Act, limits the federal government from using the military for domestic law enforcement. However, very quietly, on September 27th of 2024, within 6 weeks before the election, the Department of Defense amended the Department of Defense Directive 5240.01 to allow lethal force. Why now? Asked George Moore.
I wouldn't even hazard a guess why.
So Pazzi Comitatus goes the way of the rest of our buried Constitution.
Yeah.
We're being occupied by international interests and our so-called allies, right?
Yeah, it's called the UN. Have you ever heard of it? It's the State Department, this Council on Foreign Relations.
Yeah.
It's you live in the chump part of called America, which is the shell company.
And here it is. Just because they're making it an official statement that they can now use the military to kill you, that doesn't mean they're going to do it, right?
It doesn't mean they're going to do it. Right? Right? Surely not. Surely they would never do something like that. So, yeah. I don't know if y'all remember, what was it, Michigan State or something? In like the 70s? 1967 or I don't know. Some shit where they were fired on protesters, the anti-war protesters. Look it up. The government has previously fired on protesters, and I don't think that's done. I think that's just starting right back up again. So this is what ChatGPT has to say about it, in case you thought I was losing my mind. The recent changes to the Department of Defense policies, particularly around the Pazzi Comitatus Act, reflect a shift in how the military may engage in domestic operations under specific conditions. On September 27th, 2024, the Department of Defense updated Directive 52401, which governs its cooperation with civilian law enforcement, particularly in situations where national security is at risk. Quote, quote, quote. This update now authorizes the use of lethal force in some instances when the military assists civil authorities, such as in response to civil disturbances or other situations involving significant threats to public safety. These changes have raised concern due to their timing before a highly contentious election season. The motivation behind this update seems to center on bolstering national security capabilities in the face of potential large-scale unrest or threats, with the military stepping in when civilian law enforcement may be overwhelmed. Critics argue that this undermines the spirit of the Posse Comitatus Act, which traditionally limited the role of military in enforcing domestic laws. The act already had loopholes, including the ability for the president to invoke the Insurrection Act, which allows for military involvement during emergencies like natural disasters, public health crisis, or insurrections. These changes appeared to expand on these exceptions, raising concern about the potential for misuse during politically volatile times. The broader concern is that these updates might pave the way for military force to be used domestically in scenarios that are not purely related to national defense, which many see as contrary to the original intent of the Posse Comitatus Act. So yeah, if you're ever wondering, is Leighton spewing disinformation or misinformation, just ChatGPT the shit that I say. And sometimes ChatGPT will actually disagree with the shit that I say, because it is told by Snopes or some other CIA-controlled site that fact-checks things that something is wrong, because it's literally propagandist benefit for people thinking it's wrong. This time, it was totally straight up. That's exactly what happened. And no, I have heard Jan LeCun and other people gaslighting the fuck out of people on Twitter, saying that, oh, it's actually not a big deal, blah, 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 blah. No, it's not real, blah, 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 blah. No, it actually is a fucking thing. Look it the fuck up, you ignorant pig fuck. So yeah, now that you're starting to go, maybe we shouldn't trust the fucking military-industrial complex. Maybe they don't have our best interests in mind.
They never will. They never do.
Here is a historical example of a literal attempted coup of the president and the government by banks. Which I might add, who do you think owns the military-industrial complex companies? Banks do. BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard each own about a third of those companies. Something like that.
Yeah, if there wasn't this apex predator class like out there manipulating energy and manipulating people, like how much chaos would be happening in the world? You know,
right,
there always seems to be like, if you dig deeper, okay, there's an intelligence agent somewhere involved in that. And
well, whenever you have money, this is back from War is a Racket, the Smedley Butler thing that he wrote in the 1930s. This is a guy who was a famous general, and after it was all over, he realized like all his years of service.
Well, they approached him to do assassination, and he said, no, I won't do it. Like corporations wanted to assassinate, I think it was FDR. I'm not quite sure which the president was, but they approached him about basically doing a banker coup on the government, and he said he wouldn't do it.
Jesus Christ.
How crazy is that?
There's been a few of those organized over the years, which is fucking terrifying. But this is just like what happens whenever people are in power, especially unchecked power. And, you know, this whole term, the deep state, people want to think of that as a conspiracy theory. Okay, you have elected officials. Elected officials have to get elected. But the people that run intelligence agencies don't have to get elected, and they have massive access to money.
And power.
And they don't want to leave that position. The business plot called the Wall Street Putsch, how do you say that? Putsch? P-U-T-S-C-H? Push?
Whatever you attempt is good to me.
Okay. The White House political conspiracy in 1933 in the United States to overthrow the government, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and install Smedley Butler as dictator. Butler, retired Marine Corps Major General, testified under oath that wealthy businessmen were plotting to create a fascist veterans organization with him as its leader and use it as a coup d'etat to overthrow Roosevelt. In 1934, Butler testified under oath before the United States House of Representatives Special Committee on Un-American Activities, the McCormick Dickstein, what an unfortunate name, committee on these revelations. Although no one was prosecuted, the Congressional Committee final report said there is no question that these attempts were discussed were planned and might have been placed in execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient. Holy fuck, man.
So yeah, the next time someone says, they would never try and take over the government, that's a conspiracy theory. Well, in 1935, that was a conspiracy fact. And they knew, even all the way back then, that wars were literally created so that companies that make weapons can profit. It's a racket. That's what a racket means. It's a scam, just to make money. And money that we as a country literally do not have. They are reaping and raping us. And I don't think they're going to stop when we're out of money either.
Nope.
So, the problem doesn't stop there. We have a big problem with where AI is going. AI, as we said earlier, is rapidly increasing. A lot of people in the doomer or the decel communities online talk or have talked for the longest time about, oh, what if AI becomes sentient, or what if it becomes a paperclip maximizer, which is a very fancy term for just decides to do something that ends up destroying us that we don't even think is practical. So I, for the longest time, have disagreed with that. I don't think that's how we're going to end. I think the problem isn't AI itself, but people controlling AI. So listen to this.
Couple questions from the audience as we begin the process of wrapping up. Do you fear the power of AI? Why or why not?
Do I fear the power of AI? I fear people using AI for bad purposes. I think that people jump to this idea of, like Terminator, Skynet, the AI is the problem. I think we are so far from that. I'm not worried about more advanced AI being the problem. I'm worried about dumb AI being used by evil people. There are plenty of evil things you can do.
So really a battle of good and evil. You need the good people to have the AI and not the bad people to have the AI.
And unfortunately, it's going to be both. Yeah, and we cannot opt out. This is
right. If we opt out, then the good people don't have it, the bad people do, and then we've got problems.
Well, there's a shadow campaign being waged in the United Nations right now by many of our adversaries to trick Western countries that fancy themselves morally aligned into not applying AI to weapons or defense. And they use phrases that sound really good in a soundbite. Well, can't you agree that a robot should never be able to decide who lives and dies? And my point to them is, where's the moral high ground in a landmine that can't tell the difference between a school bus full of kids and a Russian tank? Is that really the point?
So yeah, the danger isn't AI itself. The danger is evil people with AI. And of all people to know a little bit about the military-industrial complex, Palmer Luckey would know a few things. He literally has a company that is a rival to them. So maybe that should just tick your imagination a little bit. So this is something on Reddit that I thought was a relevant framing to understand one of the main things that's going on right now with AI. And the answer is there's nothing going on in the culture regarding AI. Literally nobody's talking about it besides going, yeah, I think it's really increasing, man. It's gonna come fast. That's about all you hear people say. So read this. Are we about to become the least surprised people on Earth? So I was in bed playing with ChatGPT Advanced Voice Mode. My wife was next to me, and I basically tried to give her a quick demonstration of how far LLMs have come over the last couple of years. She was completely uninterested and flat out told me she didn't want to talk to a robot. That got me thinking about how uninformed and unprepared most people are in regard to the major societal changes that will occur in the coming years. And also, just how difficult of a transition this will be for even youngish people who have not been keeping up with the progression of this technology. It really reminds me of when I was a geeky kid in the mid-90s and most of my friends and family did dismiss the idea that the internet would change everything. Have any of you had the similar experiences when talking with friends or family, etc. about this stuff? Yes. Hell to the yes. Nobody that I know, for the most part, gives a flying fuck about AI, wants to talk about it, and when I show them physical possibilities that you can use AI for, or like explain real experts' opinions on what AI is going to transform into, they're just like, okay, man, okay. And then they want to immediately start talking about fucking Animal Crossing or fucking Sims or whatever fucking stupid game they're playing, and talk about, I don't know, TikTok or some bullshit.
Yep.
They do not want to talk about AI. It's low serotonin. They just don't have enough brain cells, enough juices in their brain cells to give a fuck about it. That is a problem. They are going to be very
Brain rotted.
They're going to be very surprised and totally unprepared when this shit starts actually taking off. And no, it hasn't started actually taking off yet. It's just barely starting. AI is the worst it's ever going to be. And that's going to be true every single year from this point forward. It's always going to be getting better. So, this is one of the board members of OpenAI. This is a financial guy from the Fed, from the Federal Reserve, that has played a big part in fact, both causing and remedying the 2008 financial crisis. His name is Larry Summers. He is now a board member of OpenAI, and he's being asked about why there's a lot of economists that doubt whether AI is going to be truly transformative to our economy.
Final question. So you operate in two relevant worlds. One is the world of technologists, which you have contact with through the board. The other is the world of academic economists who, on the whole, don't seem overly convinced of AI's extraordinary economic potential. For example, Daron Acemoglu, who won the Nobel Prize a couple of days ago, has this paper where he predicts that AI will deliver productivity increases of only about 0.6% over 10 years. How do you explain this discrepancy, and what does the economics profession seem to be missing about AI?
I have huge respect for Daron, but I don't find his analysis convincing on this. He leaves out entirely in that analysis the possibility that we will have more rapid scientific progress, more rapid social scientific progress, or better decision-making because of artificial intelligence. So his analysis seems to me to have the character of the analysis that was done by IBM that concluded that the worldwide market for computers would be 5 mainframes, or the analysis that was done by AT&T at one stage that couldn't imagine a demand for as many as 1 million cell phones globally.
It's chilling to hear Sean Connery talk so emphatically about the coming AI revolution. So yeah, a lot of people genuinely have no idea what's about to hit us. Obama is not one of those people.
With automation replacing so many blue-collar jobs and pretty soon white-collar jobs, we may need to consider bigger changes, and we should start talking about that now. Things like a shorter work week, or a universal basic income, or guaranteed income. Ideas that can spread work around and supplement the incomes of people as they shift to the much needed work that I mentioned earlier that can't be automated, that a program alone can't do. Things like childcare and education and healthcare and elder care.
So what he's saying is a lot of the white-collar jobs, like working with computers, management, stuff like that, strategy, executives, all of this shit is about to be taken over by AI. And he's correct. He's definitely correct. I disagree with him on the healthcare, education, childcare, and elderly care. Healthcare can already almost entirely be done, like an actual doctor can almost entirely be done by AI already. It's actually better and has better attitude and patient care and empathy than, I think, 90% of doctors. LLMs are. They're more accurate and nicer than most doctors. So, education. Have you used AI? You can literally have it teach you anything. It can learn about how you like to learn. It can start teaching you in ways that you learn the best about literally anything. Give it a PhD astrophysics, literally anything. At almost any level, it can help you learn and educate you. And we are not too far away from children almost exclusively being taught by AI. And yes, there may be some adult supervision of the process, but it's not going to be adults doing the teaching anymore.
Nope.
So, the other one is childcare and elderly care. We can't do that with LLMs because they don't have hands. But we're going to have robots pretty darn soon. We're going to get into that a little bit later. This is a new feature that came out from Anthropic, one of the main frontier AI labs that is a rival to OpenAI. And almost entirely consisting of former OpenAI employees that left because they didn't like the culture, of Claude, which is what the AI version that they have is, using a computer. That's right. Claude using a computer. Watch this.
I'm Pooja, and I'm a researcher at Anthropic. I'm going to show you a simple example of computer use today. My friend's coming to San Francisco next week, and I want to take him to do some touristy stuff. I think doing a sunrise hike with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge never gets old. So I'll ask Claude to figure out some logistics for us. I'll ask Claude to find a good place to see the sunrise, to help me figure out timing logistics, and help drop a calendar invite so I remember when I have to leave. It's opening Chrome, going to Google, searching, and it looks like it's found something. Great. So how far away is the location from my place? It's opening maps, searching for the distance between my area and the hiking location. Cool. So now it looks like Claude is searching for the sunrise time tomorrow. And is now dropping it into my calendar. And populating it with some details. And great, it looks like Claude did it.
Pretty simple stuff,
Yeah.
but not something your grandma can do on a computer, that's for darn sure.
Nope.
Or your mom, in some cases. So, this is robotics. If you're ever wondering when are we going to get humanoid robots? This is Marc Andreessen, the billionaire venture capitalist and internet pioneer, speaking about where exactly the robotics industry is at.
It's just sort of here's like an amazing question that's playing out right now, which is the whole history of the kind of AI robotics kind of field broadly is that everybody assumed for a very long time, including when I was in school, that you would kind of get you would get the low level stuff first, and so you would get like robots that like pack your suitcase and like clean your toilet and cook you breakfast first, and then maybe decades later you would get robots that could like compose songs or like draw artwork, right? Yeah. And it turns out to be the reverse. It turns out it actually turned to be quite easy to get a robot to like compose a song or like draw artwork. It still can't pack your suitcase.
It turns out math is actually really hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and especially right the minute you intersect with the real world, things get very complicated. But look, the AI revolution is playing out today is mainly one at these sort of higher levels, things involving basically software information bits. But I think the robotics revolution is very close. And I'll just give you my favorite example of that. There's this company in China called Unitree, and they make a robot dog. Everybody's seen the demos of the Boston Dynamics kind of robot dogs, but you've probably never seen one in real life. Because they're just too expensive. They're like $50,000 and up. This company in China has $1,600 basically that robot dog.
So do you think
so there's this robot supply chain that's basically forming up in China like really quickly. And drones were kind of an example of that. Where China just like swamped the world with drones, and I think they may well swamp the world with robots, at least on the hardware side. And then there's all these questions around how to actually build all the software for robots, and Elon and others and lots of startups are working on that. And so it may be that we have the sort of bits version of the AI revolution. It may be followed like almost immediately by the atoms version.
That's incredible. So there's a chance that the humanoid rollout will look more like a $20 subscription democratized versus a $20 million mainframe.
Yeah, look. So this company Unitree has they have I think it's a $50,000 humanoid now hardware, and if you just watch on their website, like they're advancing the sort of hardware capabilities like super quickly, and so it looks like the humanoid robots when they roll out, I don't know, mass market.
You're talking about to consumers.
To consumers. Well, the hardware cost looks like it's going to come in at I don't know $20,000, $10,000. And at that point, you can afford to have a lot of these things, right? And you can afford to have subscription models. Yeah. Right. And so I don't know. I'm not positive how fast this happens, but it could actually happen very quickly now. Yeah. One of the very funny things right now is these robots. You see the demos, these humanoid robots, like they've got their control system, which is like the state of the art. It's like this reinforcement learning algorithm to try to get it to like crack an egg without destroying everything on the table or whatever. But then they've all got like LLM user interfaces with like voice now, and so it's like struggling to crack an egg, but it's like teaching you quantum physics, right? Like in like a plummy British accent, like at the same time, right? Yeah. And so there's this software kind of wave happening right now to try to like merge those approaches together, right? And have sort of multimodal models that are capable of reasoning and planning, and the new Llama release just dropped I think last week that has multimodal open source. And then OpenAI just released their O1, the reasoning and planning engine, which they say is going to get a lot better from here. And so like it may be that in a year we actually have a sort of single multimodal model that can do reasoning and planning that can power a robot, and then we're off to the races.
He said, literally, potentially within a year. Hold your hats on, folks. Humpty Dumpty sat on a chair. Humpty Dumpty had no fucking hair.
Colin Robinson wasn't fair.
All the king's robots and all the king's men couldn't give Humpty his hair plugs again. So, this is Marc Andreessen talking yet again to Tom Bilyeu of Impact Theory, the podcast, about the exact same thing, going a little bit more detail on what robots currently are there, and I think we're going to learn a little bit here.
What kind of timeline do you have for robotics? When are we going to start having that first round of people buying them and having them in their home? I know Elon's pegged it at 20 to 30 grand. When?
Yeah, so the big breakthrough, self-piloting drones were a very big breakthrough. And the dominant ones of those in the global market are this company DJI, which is this big company in China. But those now work really well. And then there's American companies. We have American companies that have, I think, even better technology that aren't quite the same size yet, but are really good. And that's a big deal. Like, so you can have, we have drones now that can like fly between tree branches. They can fly, indoors, they can fly, completely autonomously through, like, by the way, underground tunnels. And so those work really well. And then, like I said, like self-driving cars, the Waymo, cars now are great. And, people who use them have fantastic experiences. And then the Tesla self-driving capability is getting really good. And so like, I go through those to say those are both robots, flying robot, driving robot. And so walking robot all of a sudden is not so crazy. Exact timing, I don't know, swag 5 years, but, could be 2, could be 8. I don't know, optimistically 3 or 4. The promise, there's many possible form factors for these things, right? Designs, the theory of humanoid robots, which I believe is the great thing about humanoid robots is there's so much of the physical world that assumes that there's a person present, right? So person standing in an assembly line, person driving a car, person driving a tractor, person, picking vegetables in a field. There's just all these systems, that we have that just assume there's a person. And so if you build a robot in the shape of a person, in theory, it can just kind of, fill in and do all that work.
So, we've talked about why we shouldn't trust the government. We've talked about what's going on with AI. We've talked about kind of where it's going and potentially how fast it's going to get there, what kind of jobs it's going to take over. Now, this is time for a little bit of speculation. This is physicist Brian Cox talking with Joe Rogan about basically the ideal replacement for our current representative democracy government. Should there be like a utopian AI and like what that would look like? Let's do a little speculation here.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this a while ago. I remembered I was talking to someone and they said, yeah, I'm not worried about this. Are you not worried about the fact that AI could become more intelligent than us? What is it going to be like when we're not the smartest things on the planet, which might be just a few years from now? And I might be quite relieved because I'm not sure they could fuck it up at the level that we are fucking it up. So it's...
You would have to give it legitimate sentience. Like, it would have to be completely independent from any ideology, and it would have to look at things completely objectively. But imagine a government that is run that way. Like, really run in a way where there is an actual distribution of resources for all the human beings on the planet, so poverty is instantaneously eradicated. You give electricity and clean water to everyone on Earth immediately. Immediately, we figure out how to distribute healthy food. Immediately, all the toxins and preservatives that have been giving people cancer, immediately they're removed from the human diet. They immediately make sure that we have no polluting of rivers, that we're not draining all the fish out of the ocean. Immediately change all of the treaties about nuclear weapons. All the nuclear weapons got to go. This AI government just runs over.
I imagine they'd say that immediately.
Dictators. Yeah, no more dictators. Cut the shit with the dictator. We're just going to let human beings exist in harmony, guided by this super intelligent, godlike thing that we've created out of silicone.
Yeah, honestly, I've had the same thought. And
that's the utopian view.
Yeah, and so I have thought, how could it be worse? In fact, it could be significantly better. But, yeah.
AI gets fucked with by people, right? And the AI we've seen so far has all the greasy fingerprints of human emotion and illogical. Like when Google released their AI, they asked them to show photographs, create images rather, of Nazi soldiers. So they did a diverse group of Nazi soldiers, including an African-American woman, an Asian woman, a Native American woman with braids was a Nazi. The whole, it's so nuts because it's like, okay, somebody fucked with this. This doesn't make any sense. You can't do that because if you get a virus, an illogical virus that somehow or another gets into AI and it's unchecked, if AI isn't completely logical and objective and sentient and basing it just entirely on what's best for the human race, then you just have a superpower that you have control over, and then you can decide like no more abortions. You can decide exactly.
Well, and as you said, what the definition of what is best is a moral decision that we make.
But you could make some distinctions in terms of like allocation of resources. Like you could make some. If I was a super intelligence and I looked at Earth, I'd say, listen, a lot of people are not going to like this, but there's a reality. There's the reason why you're worried about the border because people are sneaking in is because other parts of the world are fucking terrible. So that needs to be cleaned up. That needs to be fixed. We need to figure out how to raise, instead of spending money on blowing people up, let's spend all this money to raise up all of civilization so there's no more third world.
Well, that's one of the arguments. Have you ever spoke to Robert Zubrin, who I know wrote these wonderful books called about colonizing space? And so he's a fascinating character. And I spoke to him once, and he made this very simple argument that, as you said, one of the problems we have is competition for resources. And of course, the competition for resources is now so extreme that it's not only wars that it creates and always has, but it's also, of course, we damage the planet if we over-exploit the resources and so on, right? So you've got this problem about resources. And he's right. He would say this is the number one motivation for going up, because there are, in fact, infinite resources out there.
Right.
And so once you begin to have access to the asteroids and access to Mars and beyond, you can imagine a world where you alleviate that pressure.
So let me just sum that up really quick. It's possible, if AI is actually used in an ethical, correct way, if it's made in an empathetic way, I don't think it has to be sentient, it just has to be very intelligent, to problem solve, to essentially create a one-world government. There's no longer any governments, because humans, obviously, the whole reason why we don't like our politicians is that humans are imperfect. Excuse me. So, if we had this government, I think it would make more sense if humans still could vote, but individually. A little more control. But that does also open it up to populist movements, which is the whole reason why people don't like MAGA or Trump or any of that shit. What they're afraid of is stupid masses of people saying, we want something, and getting a majority, and then getting that thing, and that thing isn't what anyone else wants and is potentially damaging. That's the fear of populist movements. So then, unfortunately, it would have to make sure that it had a totally neutral, unbiased, very good education programs, so that people aren't just indoctrinated, they're not poorly educated, which is one of the main problems in America, is that our education system has been absolutely decimated and was kind of created to be terrible by the Rockefellers a very long time ago. Look it up. That's a real thing. So yeah, we were designed, education-wise, to be stupid factory workers, and that's it. So, moving on, if we really want to have a positive AI future, we're obviously going to need to make sure that we are managing resources correctly. And what they mentioned there is something I've been talking about for a very fucking long time. We need to use resources in space, not just on the planet. That is one of the best arguments against what a lot of elites have been saying, which is that we have a problem with overpopulation. The answer is we don't. We're just using Earth resources when we could be using resources in space. We could literally be growing our food in space. We don't even have to take up fields. We don't have to do agriculture down here. There's sun in space. All you need is to make a giant greenhouse in space. Obviously, there's other logistical problems along with that, but AI can solve those too. We can also just live in space. We can create any space station, any megastructure we want in space if we have AI that can do our construction for us, that can do our science for us, can do our manufacturing for us, and speed up all of these things that we've just been lagging and plateauing with. So, That's why we don't need overpopulation or need to worry about it. And if we really, really want to like get into the head of where people that are building AI and what the military industrial complex is thinking, they're going, ooh, what if we controlled the super intelligent AI? What if we took over China and Russia and everywhere else? And what if we ruled? What if we had increased science and immortality and whatever other things that AI could potentially grant us? And what if we controlled space? And what if we did all of this shit? And then, what do you think? Do you think they would just deign to kindly let us unwashed masses of idiots, of genetic defunct individuals, just live and subsist and do our little things? Do you think they would just naturally... What kind of... what does history have to say about what happens to a helpless, disempowered group of people? It's never good. It's never good. Look it up. It's never good. So, let's see what this current administration is talking about with what they want to do with AI. Check this out. This is the Biden-Harris administration, and this is Wes Roth, one of the better AI news YouTubers, speaking about it.
Big AI news today. First and foremost, the Biden-Harris administration outlines coordinated approach to harness power of AI for the U.S. national security. And as you'll see in a minute, this is kind of a big deal, and it's real. There's already real results that are being shown as a result of U.S.'s focus on becoming the #1 AI power. So before they talked about this idea of taking AI and make sure that we deliver the safe, secure, and trustworthy development of AI, making sure it doesn't lead to discrimination and things like that. But it was kind of broad. It almost kind of seemed maybe they didn't know exactly what AI is and kind of like what effects it's going to have. It seemed a little bit downplayed. This one hits a little bit different. They start with the NSM, so this is kind of like this National Security Memorandum on Artificial Intelligence. So they're saying here the NSM directs the U.S. government to implement concrete and impactful steps to, #1, ensure that the United States leads the world's development of safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. Notice kind of like the big, strong words that they're using, and I'll show you in just a second why this isn't just bold words. There's a lot behind this as well. And 2, harness cutting-edge AI technologies to advance the U.S. government's national security mission and advance international consensus and governance around AI. So I'm sure you can probably notice the tone changing, right? Because before they're like, oh, it's this cool new thing, and let's make sure it's kind of like it plays nice with people. It was kind of vague, fluffy sounding nice words. Like this is different. They're saying U.S. is going to be #1 in development. It's going to be a big part of national security. You know, national security, amongst other things, means the military. It's power. It's kind of like what governments do. Kind of, they try to survive. They try to not get brought down, right? If somebody's picking on you, you call 911 or whatever, right? You call the police. For governments back from Machiavellian days to now, a lot of this is, you know, we'll say national security. It's power. It's basically how hard it is to push them around, how much influence they can exert. And so they're saying we're going to build the best AI, and that's going to be part of national security. That's a big deal. And #3, advance, international consensus. We're going to be the best, and we're going to tell others what to do. I mean, not in those words, obviously, but just notice kind of strong language here, right? They want to implement concrete and impactful steps. And the NSM is designed to galvanize. How often do you use that word, I wonder, galvanize in these briefings? Galvanize, if you're not aware, is to shock or excite somebody into taking action. They want to shock the government into taking action. They've been watching too many of my videos. I kind of have to use shocking in the title for this one, right? Because it's literally, they said it, not me. So they want to galvanize the federal government of the United States of America to have them adopt AI to advance the national security mission, including by ensuring that such adoption reflects democratic values and protects human rights, civil liberties, and privacy. So this whole thing to me reads a little bit like they're talking about some other country. They're not naming it, but they're saying we want to do everything that country isn't doing. We'll come back to that in just a second. And in addition to that, the NSM seeks to shape international norms around AI use to reflect those same democratic values and directs actions to track and counter adversary development and use of AI for their own national security purposes. So again, to summarize, they're saying we're going to build the best AI, we're going to use it to gain and sustain our power. We're going to tell other, friendly nations and everybody else how this AI, how this technology should be governed. And countries that don't have democratic values, right, these adversary development of AIs, like we don't want those countries using it for their national security purposes. This, to me, kind of obviously they're talking about China.
So, it's almost like I'm not fucking crazy.
You're not.
It's almost like this current administration is openly talking about becoming a world superpower utilizing AI to win at any cost. So, this is one of the Doomer or D-Cell blogs run by essentially Eliezer Yudkowsky and his community called Less Wrong. It's a really great site if you want to get really deep into AI theories and just how all of this works and what a lot of the ideas of how this could go wrong. This is a very good outlier of how this could potentially work. They said, my current guess at the best way to do this is via an entente strategy, in which a coalition of democracies seeks to gain a clear advantage, even if just a temporary one, on powerful AI by securing its supply chain, scaling quickly, and blocking or delaying adversaries' access to key resources like chips and semiconductor equipment. The CHIPS Act, they're already doing that. This coalition would on one hand use AI to achieve robust military superiority, the stick, while at the same time offering to distribute the benefits of powerful AI, the carrot, to a wider and wider group of countries in exchange for supporting the coalition's strategy to promote democracy. This would be a bit analogous to Atoms for Peace. The coalition would aim to gain the support of more and more of the world, isolating our worst adversaries and eventually putting them in a position where they are better off taking the same bargain as the rest of the world, to give up competing with democracies in order to receive all of the benefits and not fight a superior foe. If we can do all this, we will have a world in which democracies lead on the world stage and have the economic and military strength to avoid being undermined, conquered, or sabotaged by autocracies, and may be able to parlay their AI superiority into a durable advantage. This could optimistically lead to an eternal 1991, a world where democracies have the upper hand and Fukuyama's dreams are realized. Again, this will be very difficult to achieve, and will in particular require close cooperation between private AI companies and democratic governments, as well as extraordinarily wise decisions about the balance between carrot and stick. So, I don't know if any of that made any sense, but essentially, just replace every time they said democracies with the military-industrial complex, because we didn't vote for Afghanistan. We didn't vote for Iraq. We didn't vote for fucking Ukraine or Gaza. We're not in control of this. This is not a democracy.
Never has been.
So why the fuck would they be using AI democratically for everyone's best interest? The answer is obviously the fuck not. So this is one last little strip from Mark Andreessen speaking about something a little similar to this.
The number of just ordinary people in regular jobs, in regular professions, who are able to use ChatGPT or any of these systems today and are able to, ask questions and get guidance and figure out how to deal with complex situations or deal with a government or navigate, laws or, figure out all of a sudden everybody has an AI they can talk to kind of help them through all these things. And so I think there's the prospect for sort of a general uplift of intelligence, basically of people having, a level of intelligence available to them at their fingertips that we haven't historically had. That certainly includes, politicians, policymakers, that certainly includes, people like military planners. Like everybody's going to have this sort of additional level, we used to call decision support systems.
Everybody is going to have AI to help them with planning, which he, despite being a perennial optimist, literally says himself that it's going to be used by the military. So, do you want to see the clip that got me reported and censored for misinformation on TikTok? This is the clip. Speaking about our government using AI and robots in war.
There's something else going on here, which is the advantage I think we can't ignore that the US and other Western powers see in testing the horrendous battlefield of the future. And that battlefield of the future is here today. And what you hear from Palestinians and what you hear from Lebanese is this AI, automated weapons, robotics, drones everywhere in the sky the whole time. The way this war is being conducted should terrify everyone in terms of what the future, which is here today for Palestinians, looks like.
That's the future that we have to be excited about. What's going on in Palestine right now, that's the future. That's what we have to look forward to everywhere. So, remember the guy that made Terminator? He finally has started talking about AI. This is James Cameron with the most based sum up of what our dilemma moving forward is with AI and warfare.
Don't panic. We have the answer from the great prophet, Isaac Asimov, in his 3 laws of robotics. A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. A robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or the second law. So basically, the sanctity of human life. We could follow Asimov and teach it that human life is absolutely sacred and above all other considerations. But even within the religious and social systems that say that, including the largely Christian US, we break that rule every day. Police using lethal force, warfighters in combat, capital punishment. And if you did insist on that principle of alignment, you couldn't connect an AGI to a weapon system. In which case, in the big AI war that's coming, you're going to face a powerful and less moral adversary with one hand tied behind your back. And you'd get your ass kicked and have huge losses, and then you'd remove that constraint pretty darn quick. Now your AGI has just lost its biggest guardrail. An AGI that's smarter than us and connected to the real world now has to make up its own mind whether human life has value or not. With police and military rules of engagement, what you're really saying is some lives have more value than others. The second it becomes non-binary, it's a murky gray zone fraught with controversy. Human beings historically have ranged from a fetus is a sacred life from the moment of conception to systematically massacring millions of helpless prisoners in the Holocaust, and everything in between. All with lots of self-justifying rationalizations, many of which seem completely delusional to other humans. And since we as a civilization can't agree on any of this, and people scream at each other all day long about it, how can we conceivably expect to create a set of hard and fast rules for an AGI to be aligned with us? The best we can assume here is that it will be aligned with the us that made it. So those guys over there, they're the enemy. You can kill them to defend us. And that's this form of territorial pseudo-morality that humans have used since the dawn of time. Us versus them, in-group versus out-group. So it becomes our superintelligence against their superintelligence. Then the question becomes, who is us? America? So is that Christian America, Muslim America, Jewish America, or E, none of the above America, liberal America, conservative America? In our polarized nation and time, there is no us. Based on the elections of the last half century, the will of the people at any given point is expressed by a government representing 51 or 52% of the population at best, and then it will likely change in 4 years. In any case, AGI will not emerge from a government-funded program. It will emerge from one of the tech giants currently funding this multi-billion-dollar research. So then you'll be living in a world that you didn't agree to, didn't vote for, that you are co-inhabiting with a super-intelligent alien species that answers to the goals and rules of a corporation, an entity which has access to the comms, beliefs, everything you ever said, and the whereabouts of every person in the country via your personal data. Surveillance capitalism can toggle pretty quickly into digital totalitarianism. At best, these tech giants become the self-appointed arbiters of human good, which is the fox guarding the henhouse. They would never ever think of using that power against us and strip mining us for our last drop of cash. That's a scarier scenario than what I presented in The Terminator 40 years ago, if for no other reason than it's no longer science fiction. It's happening.
They would never strip mine us for every single bit of cash, every single iota of value that we represent. So that is a very valid thing to be concerned about, is AI being turned against people by whoever's controlling it, whoever the fuck that is, which in this case, the military-industrial complex. So now, let's hear from Palmer Luckey about what he's truly concerned about. Here's a hint. It's not AI. The first danger is bioweapons.
And you asked if I'm worried about it. I'll be totally candid. AI is actually very low on my list of things I'm worried about when it comes to the world's evil. The world's evil. I think biological weapons, chemical weapons, particularly new advancements in biotech that allow for tailored biological weapons that go after or purport to go after particular races, particular genetic lines. They don't have to be right. It doesn't have to work. They just have to believe that that's what they've accomplished.
Aren't you just full of good news?
These are the things that actually terrify me.
So yeah, if you're ever concerned about eugenics or powerful people like Hitler, who is a famous eugenicist, trying to purge Darwinistically our population of people who are genetically malfeasant, bioweapons are quickly becoming the best way for eugenicists to operate. Anybody that doesn't match up to their idea of what kind of human should continue on the human race is soon, potentially, going to be able to be trimmed from the population with bioweapons. This is why when people start talking about gain-of-function research, about our government manufacturing bioweapons in labs that then just get released and everybody gets it, like COVID, you got to start asking, was that a test? Is that going to be the last one? And I put it to you, dear listeners, what are you going to do about this danger? Are you going to take care of your family? Are you going to give them somewhere to hide out if something like this happens? Are you going to stock up on more than just toilet paper? What are you going to do to weather this storm? Figure it out. Problem solve. That's it from us.
Peace.